Good afternoon and half a day. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Monday, July 19, and the time now is 2 o'clock. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on July 9th, followed by July 15th. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 55-36 COR, the fiscal year 2022 Appropriation Act as requested by the Governor, relative to the Unified Judiciary of Guam, fiscal year 2022 budget request. Joining me for this budget hearing are my colleagues, my Vice Chair, Senator Amanda Shelton, followed by the Oversight Chair, Speaker Therese Terlai, Senator Tony Ada, Senator Joanne Brown, and Senator Tello Taidiwi. Those testifying on behalf of the Bill 55-36 COR relative to the Unified Judiciary of Guam are invited, and they are, we have the Chief Justice, Phil Carbolito, and very close friend to my parents. Both of you are, actually, Your Honor, Alberto Lamarena, and they brought their staff. I know that the two judges are going to be the ones speaking about most of the things, so I'm not going to worry about that. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. But, Your Honors, you have all afternoon. I hope we won't have to use it all. All right? Those testifying will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, please remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. We're talking about your budget. That's all we're going to be talking about today. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individuals testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the budget hearing room. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and will be removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and your title for the record. I will now ask the Sergeant-at-Arms if the panel would please rise so that you be sworn in.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, you will affirm that any and all information that you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes. Mr. Chair, the honor oath, you may proceed.
Thank you, Sergeant-at-Arms. I only ask that other than the Chief Justice and the Honorable Lamarena, if you're going to speak, just state your name to start out one time, and then that's it.
All right.
Then you'll be able to speak as many times as the committee will ask questions of you. I will now ask the Chief Justice. Please, I notice you got at least maybe 40 slides, but please feel free to begin when you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name, for the record, is Philip Carbolito, and I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Guam. Half-a-day Chairman San Agustin, Speaker Therese Terlai, and Vice Chair Amanda Shelton, and the senators present in the public hearing room today. We thank you for your presence for our presentation today. Present with me are Presiding Judge Alberto Lamarena, Administrator of the Courts Christina Baird, and our Finance Administrator, Ms. Diane Goodmallen. Before I turn over the presentation of the Judiciary's budgetary needs to our Administrator of the Courts and Finance Administrator, I'd like to take just a few moments to give some context to the requests we bring before this body. Fiscal year 2021 has been extremely challenging, to say the least. This is true for the judiciary as much as it is true for every government entity, private business, and family in Guam. For many, sustenance came by way of COVID relief funding and individual and family stimulus assistance. but we all know that such bridge funding is coming or has come to an end. As an island, we have undoubtedly come a long way in our battle against COVID, nearing our goal of achieving herd immunity through vaccination drives, reopening businesses with fewer restrictions, and just about a week ago, welcoming our first plane load of tourists in well over a year. Yet, despite all these positives, the reality is that for several reasons, the outlook for the judiciary going into fiscal year 2022 is potentially even more challenging than the year behind us. Come September, the projection is there will be upwards of 20,000 people in the private sector who will be unemployed or underemployed. With that many people unable to earn a sufficient wage, coupled with the lifting of the moratorium on eviction and foreclosure proceedings, the courts potentially may see a spike in activity as we will be called upon to handle disputes from adverse economic conditions. Our Superior Court judges and magistrates have done well to tackle the backlog of criminal and civil cases stalled during the COVID crisis. But by the very nature of the environment our island finds itself in, the reality is that as fast as our judges dispose of cases, the influx of new cases being filed is occurring just as quickly. Social distancing requirements have meant our judges have only 3 temporary courtrooms in which they can hold jury trials, which is a challenge unto itself. But the flip side of that coin will be equally taxing on judiciary resources. Specifically, once social distancing restrictions are relaxed, which hopefully will be in the next couple of days, more facilities will be available to conduct court proceedings. More facilities will mean more activity and the requirement of more manpower to fulfill the mandates of our justice system. Within the context of this reality, I ask each of you to consider the presentation that our administrator of the courts and finance administrator, who are responsible for the day-to-day operation and the implementation of the budget, that they will now present. I thank you again for the opportunity to speak and for you to be present in this hearing room to hear our presentation. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will ask Ms. Guåhan to start our presentation.
Thank you, Chief Justice, and good afternoon, Senators. For the record, my name is Diane Guåhan. I am the Finance Administrator. If we can please, if I can request to have the slide up. Again, Senators, thank you again for allowing us and giving us the opportunity to present our FY 2022 annual budget. On May 3rd of this year, the Judiciary of Guam submitted its discretionary general fund appropriation request of $35,745,390 for the fiscal year 2022. Next slide, please. This budget request was prepared in collaboration with all of the divisions within the judiciary. This requested amount presented to you today identifies the necessary support and resources needed by our branch to continue to fulfill our mission and work. Our budget request will help address the challenges we continue to face with our declining manpower support, the support that is desperately needed to tackle the compounding workload and backlog of cases exacerbated by the pandemic. Our total funding requests can be categorized into 2 sections. First is what we considered as the above-the-line request. This request totals to $35,166,186 and will fund our normal day-to-day operations. The second category from our total request is what we considered as the below-the-line request. This request totals to $579,204 and will go towards the functions and operation of the electronic monitoring program. But first, I'd like to briefly go over what our below-the-line requests consist of. For FY 2022, we are requesting to replenish the funding source needed to continue to run the electronic monitoring program. Thanks to this legislative body, Public Law 34-115, passed back in August 2018, appropriated $500,000 to the judiciary to launch the electronic monitoring program. Although the program had a slow start, over the past couple of fiscal years, the judiciary has successfully launched the program, created the necessary SOPs, and now we are happy to report that the electronic monitoring program continues to show promising results and proves to be an innovative cost-saving measure to the Government of Guam. The amount presented to you in the request of $579,000 will assist the judiciary in continuing to run the program in the next fiscal year 2022. This funding request will be used to acquire the manpower and contractual services needed to support the growing numbers of clients in the program. We hope that this body will support the continued efforts and investments made towards this innovative program. Now, moving forward to our above-the-line request. Next slide, please. $35,166.186 is a budget request submitted to this body to ask for funding support for the judiciary's day-to-day operations. This above-the-line request comprises of 89% personnel services, 8% operational costs, and 3% utilities. Next slide, please. To provide some data in reference to our above-the-line request, I'd like to point out and highlight, next slide, that our request of $35,166,186 is 5.76% of the FY 2022 Executive's Budget's General Fund Available for Appropriation amount. Historically, as the third branch of the government, this percentage from the overall general fund available for appropriation is reasonable to maintain and uphold our purpose and responsibilities. Our above-the-line request of $35,166,000 has also only increased by 0.78% or less than 1% than what the judiciary submitted in the FY 2021. This illustrates to you, Senators, the continued and consistent funding level of support desperately needed by the judiciary to effectively operate. Additionally, compared to what was requested in FY 2017, our above-the-line request of $35,166,000 has only increased by 5.6%. This is about 1% of increase by each fiscal year in the last 5 years. Our current request is already inclusive of organic growth. This proves to this body that the judiciary continues to be fiscally responsible. Overall, since FY 2018 to the current fiscal year 2021, the judiciary has experienced an average of 14.57% cut from its submitted annual budget request. Although we were able to continue to function with this significant budget shortfall year by year, it is because we have been very, very frugal. Over the years to survive, we have had to sacrifice our personnel services. As you saw earlier, over the years, significant portion, or 89% of our budget, is allocated towards personnel services. We have managed to stay afloat and operated, meeting what is expected from us by continuing to defer hiring, delay our repairs and maintenance, and delay the replacement of any of our obsolete equipment. In the next two slides, allow me to briefly break down what our above the line comprises of by expenditure categories. Next slide, please. As seen from our pie chart, the second largest portion of our budget is allocated towards operational cost, and that is 8% of our total above the line request. 40% of our operational cost budget is mainly dedicated towards our technology support. The funding support requested for this category will help the function and mission of the Judiciary's Management Information Division, or our IT division. This division is in charge of all technological related services needed by the Judiciary. Their budget mainly comprises of services needed to annually update our case management, our accounting and human resources system, our jury system, our cybersecurity and threat prevention, file storage, and other software and subscription services. As we have seen from the pandemic, technology was a critical glue that held our organization. Technology kept our doors open and our employees working. Technology continues to be the core of our day-to-day activities. From case management, court calendars, filings, payments, accounting, to law enforcement databases, we rely heavily on technological support. In 2020, nearly 15,000 court hearings were held, with the majority of those hearings being heard virtually. Over the course of 1 year alone, the Judiciary held over 2,000 online hearings for child support and other civil matters. And this is why it is imperative that we appropriately fund our technology needs to avoid disruption in workflow and protect the case data we hold. The second highest portion of our operational budget, or 33%, is allocated towards our contractual services that are non-technology related. This budget will cover for our facility leases, which includes the Northern Court satellite at Dedido and our employee parking lot. This budget amount will also cover for equipment leases, such as our copier, stamp machines, counseling services for our probation clients, maintenance service of our elevators, generators, AC, fire alarm, vehicles, ads, printing, and other professional services. 11% of our operational cost budget will cover for our supplies needs. These include our office supplies, fuel cost, ammunition, gears, protective law enforcement items, law enforcement uniforms, testing materials, common area and janitorial supplies. The remaining 16% of our operational cost budget will be allocated towards our jury expenses, replacement of any obsolete equipment, drug testing, and replacement of unrepairable fleets. Compared to our FY 2021 submitted request, our operational cost budget has only increased by $1,495. As per our utilities, the budgeted amounts are also consistent with our FY 2021 request, with a minimal increase of $8,297. The next slide on the screen will further break down our personnel services budget requests. Next slide, please. Earlier, you saw that our above-the-line request comprises majority of personnel. And on average, the Judiciary expenses annually comprises of 87 to 90% in personnel services costs. This is because the Judiciary services are mainly manpower driven, and therefore, most of our resources have to go towards personnel. Our duties and responsibilities set by legislations require checks and balances that demands multiple levels of supervisions and review. This data on the right that you see on the screen is found in our executive summary of our FY 2022 budget request. This table illustrates the identified staffing count requested for each division within the Judiciary. Overall, we are seeking to fund 408 full-time employees, that are critically needed to address our statutory mandates. But please note that this count excludes the additional personnel needed to run the electronic monitoring program. Our 408 FTE request is broken down as follows. 42%, or 173 personnel count, will comprise of our law enforcement division within the Marshal and Probation. Law enforcement is the largest group in our judiciary population. 39%, or 159 personnel, will comprise of our employees under the Superior Court, Court and Ministerial, Supreme Court, and Client Services and Family Counseling divisions. The remaining 19%, or 76 personnel count, will comprise of our general administration and support staff. This includes our administrator of the court's office, our HR, financial, court programs, management information system division, and procurement and facilities. As we have indicated earlier, for the past 4 fiscal years, since FY 2018, the judiciary has taken a significant budget shortfall year after year. Being that our services are again manpower driven and comprising majority of our budget, drastic cuts have been consistently made towards our personnel services. Our current practice of cost-saving measure is not the most ideal. We are currently deferring the backfilling of vacated positions and not fully staffing division as needed and requested. Although we have survived with these measures in the past years, we have stretched our employees to the limit. Not only are we asking more from them, but we are giving them less based on the budget shortfalls. Many of our employees are performing 2 to 3 person duties. To help alleviate our employee burnout, we have also temporarily changed some of our operations. As an example, while our courts and ministerial division employees report to work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., we can only open the counters for in-person activities from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. instead of our 8 to 5 regular hours. This practice has allowed our deputy clerks to meet their clerical demands and perform function needed with e-filings. Within the past fiscal years, we have requested our employees to give their best efforts, and yet we have been unable to provide the proper recognition for their outstanding service due to budget shortfall. With all of these said, it is important to be reminded that our mandates and duties again requires a series of checks and balances and reviews and audits. Having sufficient manpower is integral to our operation to provide the public trust and confidence and to help ensure that all those who seek our services and goes through the justice system are provided with due process. I will now turn you over to our administrator of the courts, who will speak more on why we need the manpower we ask that you support.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker and Senators. My name is Christina Baird, and I currently serve as the Administrator of the Courts for the Judiciary of Guam. I would like to thank Senator San Agustin and Steve Guerrero for arranging this time and date for us to present our budget, and I apologize if I was a pest last week in trying to get that date firmed down. So as presented by our Finance Administrator, a large portion of the judiciary's budget, 89%, is for adequate funding for our personnel. When we prepare our budget on a yearly basis, we start out by asking our divisions, managers, and supervisors to give us what they need in order for them to fulfill their statutory mandates, their objectives, and their missions. Over probably a 2-month process, we will go through a CHOP process and reduce that number to where it becomes the absolute minimum of what they can operate on. That is the personnel count number presented today in the judiciary's FY 2022 budget request. The next series of slides are meant to provide this body with a sound fiscal explanation for our personnel count, which makes up the majority of our budget request. Recognizing both the slide limitation and the time limitation, we will focus on our three largest division, which is our Courts and Ministerial, or C&M division, which includes our judicial officers, our probation division, and our marshals division. Next slide, please. Before you right now is our Judiciary of Guam statutory mandates. The timely resolution of disputes is a mandate that is imposed primarily on our C&M division. And as you can see from this slide, the Judiciary of Guam has a heavy burden to fulfill with the many mandates imposed upon it, which really become the job description for the judiciary. When the judiciary is not adequately funded to support our proper number of personnel needed to meet these mandates, we are forced in the uncomfortable position of having to prioritize what mandates we can meet. And unfortunately, some of these mandates are not fulfilled. Next slide, please. This slide presents the statutory mandate imposed upon the judiciary of the timely resolution of disputes. This mandate really comes from a series of statutes and the Organic Act and the Constitution. The disputes cover the judiciary's handling of all the matters that come before our judicial officers in both the Superior Court and the Supreme Court. Presented on the slide is a summary of some of those categories of cases that the judiciary is mandated to address. Also on this slide is a ratio which states 1 to 30. This ratio represents the judiciary's tooth-to-tail ratio, and it concerns the number of personnel needed for us to address this one statutory mandate. Now, some of you with military background probably recognize this tooth-to-tail ratio. Its origins are from the U.S. military, and what it represents is, for every frontline soldier, or the number of personnel needed to support that soldier in fulfilling its core mission. The tooth-to-tail ratio for military commanders know that they cannot let their tooth-to-tail ratio get too low, or they will not win the battle. Now, this tooth-to-tail ratio has expanded beyond the U.S. military and is now an acceptable measurement for determining the number of supporting personnel to fulfill a core mission. There is plenty of research out there now, including Harvard Business Review, showing that this ratio is used in other industries to support how many personnel you need to fulfill your statutory mandate or your mission. It's interesting to note that in some of the research for a director, the standard ratio is 1 to 48. In trying to better quantify and justify our personnel count based upon our mandates, we took a long and hard look at this ratio, and we quantified that our tooth-to-tail ratio, which is a true and tried ratio, is for every judicial officer that we have, we need 30 personnel to support that judicial officer in the timely resolution of disputes. This is the judiciary's conservative estimate. It's probably best explained by taking you through just a standard hearing. If you look at, for instance, a magistrate hearing, if you were to come into our courtrooms while we had a magistrate hearing going on, you would see our one judicial officer or our magistrate judge, and you would also see maybe 6 to 8 supporting personnel while that hearing is taking place. What you wouldn't see is all the personnel that are in the backdrop also assisting with this one hearing. You would not see, for instance, the probation officers that went up to interview the defendant at DOC, nor would you see the interpreter that assisted with that interview. You also wouldn't see the C&M clerks who prepared all the documentation to present to this hearing, or the probation officers that prepare the magistrate report for the magistrate. Nor would you see the 2 FMD clerks waiting to take any bail payments that may come out, or the MIS support that are there to make sure that the technology is working, or the facilities worker that's going to clean up before and after. And the list goes on and on. But these are the personnel that we determine in our statutory mandate of timely resolution of disputes that are needed to support our 1 judicial officer. Now, while the number may ebb and flow with each hearing, for the most part, it usually is an increase. Take, for example, an actual criminal jury trial. In that criminal jury trial, if you entered our courtroom, you would see more than 6 to 8 personnel there. You would see probably an additional 6 to 8 marshals that are needed for the security of that particular hearing taking place. So the ebb and flow goes with each hearing, but this is the judiciary's conservative estimate of the personnel that we need to support our judicial officers. When we apply this tried and true ratio, we come up with 420 personnel needed. But the judiciary, in its usual fashion, will whittle it down, and what we have is 408 personnel using this ratio for 1 mandate. Now, if you have some skepticism that that seems high, I would ask you to take a look at the next slide. Looking at this next slide, you see another large division with the judiciary. This is our probation services division. In addition to their involvement with the timely resolution of disputes, they also have many other statutory mandates that they are required to fulfill that also requires personnel to be present and able to fill it. If you look at the number in pink, that is the number of individuals serviced by our probation service personnel in 1 fiscal year, 6,885. The services that were performed consisted of drug testing, breathalyzers, check-ins, treatment team meetings. In addition, probation service officers also go out in the field to do home checks. This division is responsible for the sex offender registry, which is beyond the timely resolution of dispute mandate. They also run juvenile probation and, of course, our electronic monitoring program. If you still have skepticism of our personnel count, let me take you to our Marshals Division. Our Marshals Division, on the next slide, please, like the Probation Services Division, have other statutory mandates imposed upon them other than the timely resolution of disputes. Like our Probation Services Division, they interface with a high number of court patrons that come into all of our facilities in a given fiscal year. If you look at just in 2020, over 100,000 court patrons entered the judiciary's facilities that were all required to be screened by our marshals at the front door. In addition, our marshals are mandated to serve warrants, restraining orders, summons, subpoenas. They also run the NCIC unit and upload critically needed information for all of the law enforcement entities on the island. They also take care of the Family Visitation Center. These are all the mandates for just 2 of our divisions, in addition to the timely resolution of disputes. They require personnel. It is worth repeating that when the judiciary is not adequately funded, we are forced into the uncomfortable position of having to prioritize which mandates we address. It is also worth repeating that the judiciary simply cannot close their doors and say, sorry, we'll open when we have adequate funding. We are mandated by statute and the Organic Act to address our cases. We need the proper number of personnel to address the mandates that the judiciary is required to fulfill. The judiciary is fortunate to have a hardworking, and dedicated staff of employees that go above and beyond every day. The past 4 fiscal years, we have pushed our employees to the limit. As the finance administrator has already highlighted, we have employees that are doing 2 to 3 jobs because of our budget shortfalls. They are weary and they are tired. We ask this body to adequately fund us so that we may give them the relief they deserve, because we feel we cannot push them anymore. In addition to our statutory mandates, when we do our budget preparation, next slide please, we would be remiss if we didn't take into account the authorized leave that our employees are entitled to take. On the slide before you is a basic employee, and to the right on the top, you see the authorized leave that they are entitled to take. This is an average, and up on the slide is some of the leave they are authorized to take. You will see not all leave is included. For instance, paternity and maternity leave are not up there, nor are bereavement. But what we are trying to present to this body is, when we do our budget, and because we have to stay open and fulfill our mandates, we factor in employees being on leave and have come up with a ratio of 7 to 1. For every 7 employees, we are required to have 1 employee to fill and make sure that we are covered. I would point out that this past fiscal year and the year prior, we have had a high number of employees that have taken military leave. As this body should know, we are required, when they are on military leave, we are required to leave their positions open. So while some of our employees have not taken leave for quite some time, we still have big vacancies with the military leave, those employees that have taken it. If you look at the leave hours presented, it is an average. There are some employees that take more leave, but our trend lately has been our employees are taking less leave because they are dedicated and they work to make sure that our mission and objectives are fulfilled. It is tragic that our employees, in order to take leave, have to get sick or break a leave in order to leave their job posts, but that seems to be the trend for the judiciary. And while our employees' dedication is honorable, we need adequate funding to make sure that our employees are entitled to take the leave they are authorized to take. Next slide, please. This last slide is our looking forward slide. This is our innovation in judicial services, where we are seeking funding to support some of our moving forward projects. The Finance Administrator has already presented to you the electronic monitoring, what we're asking for in our budget request. I wanted to add just a few more points about the electronic monitoring program. As most of you know, we started this program in 2019, and when we were tasked with it, the judiciary took it beyond what had never been seen on the island, which was the GPS tracking. Not even the federal side of the house had done GPS, but we dove into this program and tried to utilize the funding to the best that we could. When we reported last year before this body, we had 11 people on electronic monitoring. But it seems we've gotten through the bump of the road, and we are proud to report that as of today, we have 60 clients on electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring is a fiscal gold mine and is worthy of this body investment and funding and supporting and continuing to support the electronic monitoring program. Whether you think it's $110 a day to house somebody at DOC or $130, doesn't matter, because the outcome is millions of dollars in saving to the island with the use of electronic monitoring. I will remind the body or tell the body that if we don't get the funding this year, by the end of this calendar year in December, we will be out of funds, and electronic monitoring will only be available for those who can pay. The other innovation on the slide before you is our improvement initiatives for better justice, or really what comes down to our technology improvements. What the pandemic showed a lot of us is the importance of digital readiness and having the proper technology in place. While technology acceleration was new to some, the judiciary embraced video conferencing and remote hearings over 15 years ago. We put in place our video conferencing and limited transportation of prisoners and the workforce needed for that. The result has been thousands of dollars in savings for the island. That video conferencing also assisted the judiciary greatly during the pandemic. As we continue forward, the judiciary is looking for two categories of appropriative funding to make sure we have our improvement initiatives for better justice. Those categories are broke down into the access to justice and cost measures, and then our case management. Under the access to justice, we are looking at a number of advances that we want to put in place. One of them is the online dispute resolution, which allows individuals with little or no legal experience to initiate cases and manage them to a conclusion. The ODR, or the online dispute resolution, results in reduced costs and is workable for all parties involved, where some don't even require the assistance of an attorney. The other is our electronic digital evidence. The implementation of a digital evidence management system also allows the parties to handle their evidence and submit it digitally and reduces our paper footprints. Last, our document management system. This body so graciously took Bill 136-36 through was our digitalization of our case files, and we are moving forward with that to reduce our paper footprint and the need for our storage facilities. Last is our case management system, the funding for that, which is our JustWare system. This is the backbone of the judiciary's operations. It was put in place back in 2011 with federal funding. Since that time and presently, we no longer have the support anymore for JustWare and need to move it forward to another system. Fortunately, our negotiated contract allows us to make that transition into e-courts. We still need funding to support the training and all of the other elements necessary for that transition. This concludes the series of slides that I wanted to present to this body to highlight some of the basis and justification for what's presented in our FY 2022 budget request. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I will now defer to the Chief Justice for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the theme of our presentation, there was two primary themes, and that is centered around the mandates that have been statutorily imposed upon us, and that if we were going to try and satisfy all that is expected of us, then there's a certain level of manpower that we are requesting. And it comes down to simply that if we are not able to have that level of manpower, then we prioritize in terms of what it is that we feel that should be provided. And so we are asking for the support of this legislature to help us satisfy the mandates that have been imposed upon us statutorily. We feel, a focal point of maintaining law and order in our community. We are a component of that mandate that in terms of keeping our community safe. And so we need your help in doing our job, and we're hoping that we get the support of this body. With that, Mr. Chairman, we are available to answer any questions and hopefully we can satisfy that what we are asking is something that is deserving of the third branch of government. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the senators.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. I'm going to assume you are aware of the letter and the resolution that this body has submitted to the governor requesting that the Unified Judiciary System receive $10 million in ARP funds, correct?
Yes, and we are very appreciative of that, and the administrator of the courts, that if we were to get that type of support, we outlined the broad categories that came within our reading of the American Rescue Plan regulations that will qualify for this funding, and we are very appreciative of that support from the legislature.
All right. Based on a report provided by the governor regarding the CARES Act funds, the Judiciary of Guam was approved funding of $84,000. There was also a lump sum of about $4 million in payroll costs approved for line agencies such as OPA, Office of the Attorney General, and Judiciary. How much of these funds were received by the Judiciary, if anything? I know you're the ones going to answer, so please feel free to answer it.
Yes, Senator, I can answer that. In reference to federal assistance received related to any COVID-19 cost, to date, the judiciary has been reimbursed with approximately $2.5 million.
Okay.
Approximately, Senator, 52% of this amount are relative to our law enforcement personnel who assisted the Guam Homeland Security and the Department of Public Health as frontliners.
So 52% was for you to help them do what they need to do.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Oh, I apologize. I'd like to also recognize that we are also joined by our colleague, Senator Sabina Perez. Okay. What is the status of the Judicial Building Fund? What is the current balance?
So, Senator, I apologize, I don't have the information readily available, but as we speak, the fund is, I think we are at a fund balance of about $800,000. We are continuing to rebuild the Judicial Building Fund.
Okay, all right. What are the judiciary's current expenses for rent, and what buildings, locations are they associated with? Just generalize. Any plans for construction or improvements in the judiciary's, your building? Are there any plans for construction or improvements? Are you gonna improve your building? You're gonna get a new building? Do you hope to get something? Can you please tell us if you hope to have some present to us so we can figure out a way how to help you?
Yes, Senator. So in the beginning of January of 2020, we sat down and prioritized projects of what the judiciary, what we called our capital improvement projects. One of those projects is the restoration of the Guam Historic Courthouse. That building has not been addressed or seen any improvements for quite some time, and we are in desperate need of improving that building and getting it up to core. That houses our Probation Services Division right now, and that's one of our big capital improvement projects that we are looking to fund through either JBF or wherever else we can get monies. Appropriate monies would be nice, but
and how much is that?
Right now, Senator, I believe that cost is probably in the $4 million range.
Because $4 million?
Yes, sir. That has Guam Preservation oversees that. It has a lot of historic value in that building. We would have to work with them for the preservation of some of the tile work and other parts of the building that require specialized attention.
Okay, if it's possible, come up with the total amount, the true amount?
Yes.
Not for us to give money to Preservation Trust, but to give you, the courts, so you can make sure it gets done. You know what you need to do.
Senator, right now we have acquired the service of an architect to come in and design the building working with Guam Preservation. Once we have that, we will follow our procurement and put it out for bid, and then we will know what that amount is.
All right, thank you. The judiciary's FY 2022 budget request consists of 110K in modernization, improvement, and maintenance. What are the judiciary plans for the use of these funding?
Senator, if you don't mind repeating the question?
Judiciary's FY 2022 budget request consists of 110K in modernization, improvements, and maintenance. What are the judiciary's plan for the use of this funding?
So, Senator, relative to that amount of budgeted request, our intention is to actually replace some of our unrepairable vehicles. The last time a replacement was ever done to any of our vehicles was probably 2014 or many years ago.
All right. And only 110 is all you need?
Well, we try to be fiscally responsible and
Okay.
not to over.
All right, not a problem. Is judiciary receiving any federal funding at all? Any federal funds coming your way?
Aside the CARES Act,
Right.
yes, Senator, we do have multiple federal grant,
Okay.
and it's mainly towards to our specialty courts.
Okay. I was actually hoping you were going to say something else other than grants. Grants, I understand.
Oh.
We got to make sure we match whatever grant you need. If you need funding to match your grants, we need to fulfill that. Are there any prior year outstanding obligations to include salaries, increments, pay adjustment, reclassification, etc.? If so, what are the amounts? Do you have any prior year obligations?
In fact, Senator, we do. Currently, we're experiencing a high number in our CTE balanced. Currently, if you asked us how much it would pay to just pay out our CTE, we would need $320,000. And that
You said PPE?
CTE, Your Honor. Sorry, CTE, Senator, our compensation time earned.
Okay. And it's about 300,000?
Yes, and it's still accruing, Senator.
Okay, and that's all. That would take care of anything going beyond or way before this fiscal year, correct?
In addition to that, Your Honor, Senator, we do also have expected retirements coming at the end of the fiscal year, in which the funds of payout, we're still trying to determine what will be used for.
If you can, please try to come up with a calculation that's pretty close to it. I can understand if you go a little bit over, but
Yes.
as close as possible. And the reason why is because we're getting close to finishing up our budget act.
Yes.
And once we know it, then it behooves us to figure out what to do to take care of all the employees. Because you are asking for 31 million just for personnel alone, and that doesn't mean, and if you get that, personnel at least is taken care of, then we figure out, make sure you get the money to
Yes.
do
thank
the
you.
EM program, because we want to save $4.7 million from DOC. Well, then let's do what we need to do. And most of the mandates that you're pursuing and asking for funding are things that this body has passed. You didn't create it, we created it. With your concurrence, we created it and it was passed into law, so we need to do our part. And with that, I have no further question at this point, and I'll ask the Oversight Chair, followed by my Vice Chair, and then we'll proceed on with my other colleagues. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you just repeat, for the CTE comp time earned, you owe about over 300,000?
That's correct,
What's the
Senator.
difference between that and overtime? Why do you pay comp time?
So, Senator, because of lack of funding, generally they're basically the same. It's just the timing of payment. So, overtime usually are paid, right as soon as the hours are incurred within this, pay period. The CTE is hours that the employees have worked, but we record it as a compensation time earned, and which, when funding is available, we do provide it as a payout, or they can also use it as a leave hours.
How long has this practice been going on? Where you have comp time earned unpaid, or you don't convert it to something else?
So the policy has been established for many years already. It's the funding, Senator, that once the funding is available, then we can ultimately do payout for classified employees who earns any CTE hours or compensation time earned, if they are not utilized prior to any for their resignation or retirement, it is also paid out. So it's considered as a leave accrual.
Yeah, you don't give them leave? I mean, for that? Isn't that how other agencies use the comp time?
Yes, they can use it as a leave instead of their annual or sick leave.
Okay. So the judiciary's request is 10 million more than the governor had, according to this OFB sheet, that the governor had allocated for the judiciary in her FY22 request. And it's about a couple million, from 29 to 35, that's the increase from the FY21 authorized level, yeah. And you explained that a lot of this is for personnel, but that, is this for current personnel or for expanded personnel?
So, Senator, the request of the 35 million submitted is in hopes of fulfilling ultimately 408 personnel. So, to answer the question is to expand our current personnel count.
Currently, Madam Speaker, the judiciary operates with a fill position of, if I recall correctly, of about 377 position. So we're trying to catch up in terms of the cuts that have been made over the last 4 or 5 years. In 2017, we had a little over 400 positions, and 4 or 5 years later, we're just trying to come back up to that level to satisfy the mandates that we have outlined.
All right, so to go from 377 employees to the 400 and, sorry, what was the number? 480?
408, that is correct.
408, okay. And then, so for this personnel increase, you also said it would cover increments?
Increments are part of our budget that is being requested, that's correct.
And the, does this include increments for judicial officers?
Currently, Senator, that was not part of the first collaboration with the divisions and preparation of the budget. So no.
It is not included? Okay. There was discussion in one of the Judicial Council meetings that the ARP funds might be used to cover increments. But this budgeted amount, your request for FY22 covers mandatory increments. Are you still planning to use ARP funds for some increments for judicial officer increments or anything like that?
We have specified, maybe the administrator of the courts can better address this, but the categories authorized expenditures on the American Rescue Plan, while it's a little more liberal than the CARES Act, personnel was not initially authorized, and the CARES Act in reference to making up for our budget. Now, the American Rescue Plan is a little more liberal in that it allows us to fulfill the budget gaps as a result of the effect of the COVID. Now, we have not received any information that the executive branch will cover personnel to that effect, and I don't know if the administrator wants to add anything to that.
Yes, Senator. So if you look at the letter that we sent to you as to the priorities that we will look at the ARP funding for, our priorities are the COVID-19 necessary expenditures, our projected revenues, losses in both the JBF and the client services. The next is our modernization of our cybersecurity technology and public access, and then the expansion of the probation building or the Guam Historic Courthouse and then the last is the budget shortfalls that we've had over a number of, the last 4 fiscal years. So if we get to that and have sufficient funding, we will examine some of the incremental or salary adjustment shortfalls that we have not been able to meet for the past 4 fiscal years.
When you say shortfalls, you've received your entire appropriation, is that right? I mean, as up to date?
As far as
We have received our allotments in terms of what has been appropriated by this body
Right.
for 2020. There was one year in which, 2018, I think, if I'm not mistaken, where the entire government had a 10% across the board
Yes.
cut.
Yes, yeah. Okay, and then are other non-classified employees at the judiciary also receiving increments?
So Senator, only unclassified receive their, incremental period, but the limited term positions do not receive any increment.
All right. Can I ask about the electronic monitoring program real quick? This is going to be managed by contract? I mean, are you entering into a contract for this, or you're
No.
going to?
So how the electronic monitoring program is, we have a vendor who provides us with the bands and does the tracking, but that tracking is done side by side with our Probation Services Division. So our Probation Services Division really carries the heavy load of the electronic monitoring program. They put the bands on those clients that are selected, and then they monitor too. If there are violations, it's our Probation Services Division that will go pick up if there is a violation that occurs. So any contract that's done is minimal of the ban, providing us with the ban and the technology for the tracking of those on that program.
So how much is that contract, and where is that accounted for?
The contract is done on a per ban basis, is how we are running the contract. The contract right now, and I don't have those figures in front of me, the average is $6 a day for a defendant or a client to be on the electronic monitoring program. We pay the vendor that amount.
Okay, so you pay the vendor, you don't know how much is the contract per year, but you pay about $6 per day. I mean, but this is for, what are you planning to pay in FY22?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you asked me.
What are you estimating to pay the vendor in FY22? That's, you're describing that to be separate from the amount that you're requesting here, right?
No.
Is
That's-
it this amount then?
Yes.
You said, you called it the below the line 579,000?
Yeah. Senator, I can break down the 579,000 request. So for FY 2022, we are looking into potentially servicing up to 100 clients per month at a $6 per day. That is estimated at 219,000. In addition to that, Senator, we also would like to fill more, because of the increase in the client count, we are looking to employ 4 additional probation officers who will be strictly on watch 24/7 in managing the program. The rest of the funding, Senator, will just to fund whatever equipment and supplies and other communication device that the program needs. So all in all, Senator, that's about 579,000.
Okay. All right. Your budget request package indicated that it includes health insurance costs or increase in health insurance costs. So has there been an increase in your health insurance costs?
Speaker, we're still in negotiations with the vendors that have put in for that procurement, so we're really not in a position to put any of that information out. Our budget does have some organic growth with that, or for lack of a better term, but we're still in the middle of our negotiations on our health insurance.
Okay. Can I ask about the client service fund? Is there a balance in that?
Sorry, Senator. Unfortunately, I don't have the information readily available with me, but there is a fund balance, I would say a little over $1 million, but again, I don't have the exact information with me.
All right. According to the statute, it says that all the increase in fees since 2002 and fines that are paid after that date were supposed to go into this account. But
Yes, that's correct,
and
Senator.
how is it used?
So, Senator, it's actually guided by, I believe
It's used,
It's not accounted for in this budget, right? Or
No.
the budget presentation? Yeah, so
No.
how would that 1 million be used in FY22?
So, Senator, it's actually guided by 7 GCA Chapter 9.6, and it's usually strictly for costs or expenses to provide those indigent defendants with rights to counsel and all other related costs for those.
All right, and how has the cost been in the current or the past fiscal year?
Are we in reference to counseling? Counsel?
Yeah, I mean, do you have, do you spend the entire, I think we used to appropriate 700,000, but yeah, do you expend the entire amount every fiscal year, or is there leftover? Like, is this 1 million left after expending for the fiscal year 21?
Currently, we're looking. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator. We're looking at. We're projecting at about maybe 700,000 to 800,000 to be the fund balance in the account, with the anticipation increase in the cases that were coming in. Again, as much as possible, we don't try to. We really try to reserve this for those indigent that needs counsel. So I'd also like to add that because of the pandemic, we did see about a 25% decrease in collection at the peak of the pandemic. So currently, this fund we really try to maintain for its purpose.
Right, but they're expecting that a rush of cases will be coming in now that things have opened, right? So, but what is the 700 to 800 balance? Is that what you do expect to expend on legal services fees or costs?
So Senator, we did
Or
budget
after?
for this fiscal year. We did budget a 1.2 million to be expended for indigent defense counsel.
And that's not including the alternate public defender? Okay.
No, it's no longer within our budget. We are
Right.
no longer receiving the pass-through funds.
Okay. So how did you make do before? Well, never mind, we'll go backwards. Okay, do you know if the governor had only requested for 25 million versus the 35 million that you're requesting, actually her request came in, I think even before the ARP was passed, so I'm not sure if she was intending to make up that shortfall with ARP funds or some other funding sources, or are you aware?
Let me just say, Madam Speaker, that first of all, I'm not clear as to what the governor has allocated. It's a lump sum that I feel that they then say it's up to the legislature, I think, how to apportion. There's never been any consultation in reference to what the executive branch thinks is a reasonable budget for the judiciary. Our submission is directly to the legislature without any type of communication, consultation with the executive branch. So I don't feel that they are informed as to what our needs are. That would just be an arbitrary figure based on a pie that needs to be divided and leaves it to the legislature in terms of how to allocate it, I assume. And so this is the reason why we are making our case as to why we feel we're entitled, or that we should receive the sum that we're requesting of 35 million to fulfill our mandates.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out why it's 10 million less. But so do you have any other projects funded under the Judicial Building Fund besides you're planning to fund the historic courthouse repair or renovation?
Yes, Speaker, we have a whole list and like I said, we prioritized our projects back in 2020, but because of the declining JBF funds and our need to make sure our debt service stays at a doable, whether we fund those projects in the order presented remains to be seen. But we also have other projects, which is the construction of our 8th courtroom, the modernization of the Judicial Center and other facilities. By way of example, we're still operating with, a Cat, I think, 3 fiber when we need to upgrade. We have a lot of modernization we would like to see take place so that we can meet the technology needs of the court. But that list is available. It's on one of our Judicial Council resolutions, and it lays out the priority of projects that we would like to use that funding source for, but whether we use it or complete those projects remains to be seen.
Okay, so as of now, you're not doing those other projects. This will be the first one on your list.
As far as we have drawn down already. We have had 2 drawdowns under the Bank of Guam loan. The first was to refinance the past loan, but the second was to purchase the formerly known as the Purple Building, the San Ramon Building, which turned out to be one of our greatest assets during the pandemic for housing our in-person criminal trials. So we did already purchase and use funds under that drawdown for that building. So that has already taken place. Our next priority is the Guam Historic Courthouse, though.
Okay. Are there any other funds that are not shown here in this budget request besides the Judicial Building and the Client Services funds?
So, Speaker Terlai, in reference to the budget submission, they are all indicated. If you refer towards the last page, I think it's under one of the Appendix C. It does list down all of the other restricted funds that.
So what are there? Are you, in the last budget, when they allocated money, they put that some of it was coming from, I think the Safe Streets Act, or is that not listed this time?
So, Senator, the Safe Street Funds is actually a separate special fund appropriation.
Yes.
And that actually funds the Family Visitation Center facility lease.
Yeah.
So, in the
Are
past,
you still expecting that?
Well, Senator, in fact, in the past 2 to 3 fiscal years, we have not received any of the Safe Street funds allocated to the judiciary.
Oh, they have not given it to you. Okay. All right. Did you have any other income? Yeah.
So, Senator, the rest of the special funds or restricted funds are really allocated towards special programs, and I'll name a few. One of it is a Board of Law Examiners. Those are strictly, of course, to administer all of our law examiners. We do have the Compiler Law Fund. We also have multiple funds, such as our Special Process Server Program. We do have a Guam Preservation Trust for the Guam Historic Courthouse Restoration Planning Project. So we did receive a few $1,000s to help us design the Guam Historic Building. Those are just to name a few from the appendix and the summary.
All right. I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Amanda Shelton, and after you, it'll be Senator Tello, and then Senator... After you, it'll be Senator Tello, and then Senator Ada. Thank you. Senator Amanda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Buenas, everyone. Thank you for being here today and for the presentation. I have a question about the operational costs and utilities slide that you presented. Was it correct that you said the operational costs only increased by $1,000 for the year?
Yes.
Okay, and that 40% of the operational costs is going towards the MIS division. Can you explain how that increase is only $1,000 when we heard you talk about so much improvements to the MIS system and the really beefing all of that up to respond to the pandemic?
So, Senator, what we had done is we had diverted some of our initially requested FY 2021 requests that we did not, we no longer put into our request, and I'll give an example. One of it is some of our threat prevention contract agreements or contractual services. Instead of that, we turned it over as, okay, let's just get vehicles this fiscal year. So it's a combination of that, Senator. We've cut some expenses, we've cut some of our office supplies, and instead we're gonna do other like ammunition and all other. So we, again, every fiscal year, we meet with our division managers. We had them lay out what do you actually need in this coming fiscal year, and then from there, we do budget cuts. If we determine that, okay, we can defer it, this is more important, and that's exactly what we did in this fiscal year.
Okay. Okay, and that increase to the operational costs is all you need to keep this MIS division with all of your new technological needs running for FY 2022.
Senator, if I may, under the CARES Act funding, there were very restricted amounts that that fund could be used for, and one of the restricted amounts were technology. So a lot of a big bulk of the leftover after we paid our frontliners went to support our virtual platforms and our technology needs. So we did take a lot of the expenses that we were looking for in FY 2021 and even this fiscal year and used CARES Act funding to support those technological increases and advances. We also have used some of the remaining monies that we had from FY 2021, and we put that back into the technology because we had an immediate need for our technology to be up and running. So a lot of that came from FY 2021 carryovers, and we dumped it as quick as we could into our technology because that was the needs that were created by the pandemic. One of those is our backup servers. With the increase in the amount of hearings that we held remotely, we had to have better servers to support that. The other is our digitalization projects that are going forward. We need to have additional servers to store all that digital information. So we did use CARES Act funding to support our technology because it was approved and it was authorized under the guidelines presented.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand. I'm glad to hear that we found that support elsewhere. That was very helpful. I see it from your 2021 request for personnel services, operational costs such as counseling for the juvenile drug court treatment program and then the adult drug court treatment program that has lessened. And can you just talk to that a little bit? Am I reading this correctly? And what can we attribute those decreases to? Are we seeing less clients in those programs or?
No. So the judiciary did receive a judicial drug court grant this year under the SAMHSA. So a lot of those cases are being referred in there. So it's not so much a reduction of services, it's just more use of the federal funding that supports those programs.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I do appreciate all that you presented today, the information that you gave us, and also all the work that you've done throughout the pandemic to be able to adapt and really meet the needs of our community. Thank you to the entire team at the judiciary, and I look forward to supporting your budget requests in the coming months. Thank you very much. And now I'll ask Senator Titagui if you have any questions for the panel.
Oh, thank you. And good afternoon. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was a little bit shorter than last year's presentation, and not as thorough. I don't know why, but I enjoyed the one last year. It was very, very thorough, especially when it came to case filings. You know, you brought those issues up. In fact, it showed your case filings from January to June 29th, a total of 4,289. And because of COVID and what we went through, were those cases anticipated to at least, well, that was 6 months. So in the next 6 months, which we don't have the data from June 29 to January, did that caseload go up?
My name is Alberto Sila Moreno III. I am the presiding judge of the Superior Court of Guam. To your answer, Senator Taidigui, for January of 2020 to December of 2020, we had a total of 4,491 filings at the court, of which on the civil side, we had 1,080 filings. Criminal felonies, we had 637. Criminal misdemeanors, we had 514. Domestic, which is basically child support and domestic cases, and child custody, we had 458. On juvenile delinquency, 129. And juvenile proceedings, 259. Protective orders, 126. Probates, 168. Restitution cases for collection from criminal defendants, 159, small claims, 576, and special proceedings, 239. Now that was for fiscal year, that was from January 2020 to December 2020. As you notice, despite the pandemic, we still had a large increase, especially in felony cases. Now for January 1st to July 7th of this year, we've had a total of 2,569 cases filed, of which civil cases were 564, criminal felonies 333, criminal misdemeanors 231, domestic cases 285, juvenile delinquency cases 31, juvenile proceedings 165, probate cases 133, protective orders, 73, restitution or collection from criminal defendants, 103, and small claims, 401, and the other categories of lesser numbers.
Yeah, then I'm noticing there is a decline from 2020 to this year in cases, based on what...
This is only until July,
yeah.
So this is only for the first 7 months.
Right, from January 1st to June 29th, and I'm looking at the data you provided in the last budget hearing we had last year, and it's a total of 4,289. And right now you're saying you have 2,500 and some, so it is substantially lower than what you had last year. I liked the ability to be able to see the caseloads because it tells us, I know how hard you're already working, but it lets everybody else in the public know just how much caseloads that you have. But it is then lower than before. The federal funds that you mentioned was expiring last year. I think, Diane, when you were talking about all these additional funding coming to the courts, I'm sorry, let me get a little bit closer. And you mentioned that a lot of them were expiring in 2020 of September. And because of that, have you been able to at least renew any of them or reapply to those grants? Have you, in other words, any grants have been jeopardized from what you had last year that would be jeopardized this year or was not awarded because it was not renewed for one reason or another, or the grant ran out, its lifetime met? Did you have any shortfalls at all in that perspective?
In reference to federal grant,
Yes.
No, Senator, we did not see any of those
Good.
accounts that were jeopardized.
Okay, that's good to hear. Very good to hear. The other one, of course, we talked about health insurance. It was talked about that earlier. I'll just allow my other colleagues to talk about that. The eighth judge, last year we were trying to get the eighth judge. Can you give me the status on that, Your Honor, Chief Justice?
The eighth judge would require additional appropriation from this body if that was to materialize. There continue to be a need for an eighth judge. However, considering the finances of the government, it was not included in the appropriation requests for the, in reference to our 2022 FY request.
Okay, not included. Can you give me an estimate of, to have this 8th judge on board, how much it would cost additional?
It will cost approximately $500,000 to staff an 8th judge. That would be the judicial officer, the law clerk, and then the staff, 3 additional staff that's needed for that.
Okay.
The chamber clerk, the presiding judge, the bailiff, and the law clerk. Yeah.
So about $500,000 is what you're looking at in order to fund this 8th judge and everything that comes with it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Senator, we submitted with our FY in our last request when we asked for the 8th judge, we gave a breakdown in that budget submission of what the additional cost would be. So in that is the staffing needed for the 8th judge, the bare minimum. And that, as the Chief Justice and the presiding judge have pointed out, are the judge, the law clerk, the chamber administrator, the bailiff, and the marshal. We also had the equipment that we think, or not think, that the judge would need to operate with, but it doesn't include infrastructure support as far as designing a courtroom or putting that in place. It's just the bare minimum. But that was in the submissions. Every time we did submit for the 8th judge, we had that breakdown in those budget submissions.
Thank you, Christine. The other question I had with regards to the employees, of the 408 that you're requesting, how many of those positions are, well, you're asking to have a level of 408 employees, and right now you're at 377, if I'm not mistaken, 377, okay. Of the additional employees, how many are new positions?
So,
Those will all be new bodies if we were to get the level of funding. It would be adding those additional bodies to bring us up to 404. I mean, we request this almost every year, and this has not been funded. And we're hoping that the legislature would support this level of funding.
Because what I have here in the last submission in FY21, it shows areas of classification at 276, unclassified 77, and you go down the list. And then at the end, it says new positions. And last year, you requested 14 new positions. So that's what I was trying to refer to of the number that you gave us, 408. How many of that is new positions?
So, Senator, a lot of the positions we don't really consider as new, but we do need additional marshals, deputy marshals. Like what we mentioned earlier, every fiscal year we did re-collaborate with each division managers and had them restaffed, or basically identify at a bare minimum how many employees or staffing will you need to effectively operate in the next fiscal year. So we had to rearrange a few of our positions. In fact, we've denied some of the requests just to reprioritize our operation for the next fiscal year. A lot of the requests that we are putting in as part of the 408 are in fact vacated positions that we just continue to defer.
Yeah, okay, so that was throwing me off. You know, if you're going to fill a vacancy of or need a new marshal, it's not considered a new position. Okay, so maybe we can, get something that's much clearer.
It's to fill the vacancies is what we're trying to obtain.
And then we have that breakdown, correct? Okay. The last thing I'd like to bring up is, since COVID, all the agencies, even ourselves on a personal level, we've learned to go around certain things that we've never done before, and that is the use of technology. And I know that last year broadband was very important. I think you put some of your funding and budget into broadband. The presentation that you brought to us today what additional or more technology have you incorporated in here to reduce costs, increase efficiency through technology? Is there anything in here, a project that you funded for that, for digitalization, for increasing of efficiency? This is cost-saving measures in place.
So let me think if I can break this down right. So what we did with the technology with CARES Act funding was we expanded greatly our virtual platforms. And we used CARES Act funding for that to make sure that all of our judges had, Polycom. They had all different kinds of technologies where they can just walk into their courtroom and the parties can stay at home and present. So they all have Zoom accounts. They all operate under those technologies. What we're asking for in the budget for this year's submission is to enhance those. And I already spoke with the online dispute resolution, the digital evidencing presentation, and of course our digitalization of all of our court files that we're required to maintain. We're trying to reduce our paper footprint as best we can. So our technology is broke down to public access and trying to make it equal for all patrons that come before the judiciary. And technology, it's interesting, the Chief Justice in his State of the Judiciary address pointed out that technology seems to be used by everyone. We have a higher turnout rate for our child support hearings because they can call in by phone. And that technology has been set up. We're trying to further enhance those, all the way down to notifications to our jurors. We're looking into email notifications so they don't have to call in or come in to the judiciary to find out that the case settled. So we continue on a daily, I would have to say monthly measure to look at expansions in technology. That's one of our strategic plans. We have a strategic group that looks at technology for us to utilize and advance for public access, quality, ease, and economy. The other is, of course, our case management system. We're looking to expand that. It was last put in place 10 years ago, and as we all know, technology, in 10 years, that's dinosaur technology. So it seems we are constantly introduced to other advances that we need to make. As we were constructing our 8th courtroom, it was brought to our attention by our IT consultant I think I spoke earlier in this, and I'm probably saying this wrong, but our CAT fiber is a 3 when it should be a 6. And we wouldn't have known that, but it attributes to why we get a lot of drop technology and a lot of slowness and speed. So that needs to be replaced in all of our facilities. In addition, our Windows, we operate under Windows 7. We are looking, if we have the proper appropriated funds, we will look to upgrade that so that we can operate in a more advanced, or I don't even know if that's considered advanced now. There may even be an 11 by now. But we are definitely operating behind what is industry standard. So we look to advance all of that.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's very thorough. You went through about everything when it comes to that, and I just want to make sure that ongoing initiative to go in that direction by reducing costs and increasing transparency as well as efficiency in technology is placed in this budget somewhere. But can you point out where, maybe Diane, in your budget here that it shows that you've actually are utilizing, or are you kind of relying on some ARA funding to get you to where you want to be?
So, Senator, our management information system division is on page 87, Senator, of the submitted budget request that we had.
That's management information systems that I
Yes.
have? Yeah, okay. And I'll look through this, and then, but in this budget bill, Mr. Chair, that we have in front of us, that's where I kind of want to look where it would be in what the spreadsheet that we received from OFB in this section, because I have, it's all broken down to Supreme Court, Superior Court, General Administration.
All right, moving along, do you have any other questions, ma'am?
So yeah, is it in would it be managed? You have this sheet in front of you right here, Diane? This one from BBMR? I'm sorry, Bureau, OFB?
No, Senator, I do not have that
Okay,
documentation.
well, yeah, can you go ahead and give it, to try and find out where you would put this type of funding in that area, just so that we don't miss out on this opportunity. It's a great, like Christine, you explained it perfectly for anybody who's listening, and the importance of technology and where we're going. I mean, we were all just pushed into that direction at warp speed, you know.
So, Senator, under the general administration, it would be on the third category. 1, 2, 3.
Financial management?
Correct. It would be under management information systems.
Oh, got it. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So that's all of our MIS divisions, technological category supports are within this line item.
Yeah, and I notice it isn't that much more considering all the stuff that you want to put into this, so we'll see what we can do. Try and push, so hopefully the ARP money will come in. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. I appreciate it, and I greatly appreciate your presentation today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Tyree. Senator Ada, do you have any questions or comments for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd sure to thank you, Chief Justice and Presiding Judge, for being here with your team today and presenting your budget to the Guam Legislature. I just have a couple of questions. Hopefully you'll be able to give me some answers. On your federal grants that you currently have, do you have any that is coming up to expiration that requires the court now to fill those positions or fund those programs through the general fund?
Yes, Senator, we do have some grants that requires local matched and at some cases in-kind matches.
So what I'm talking about is once the grant expires, then you would have to pick up that program or the personnel, and that was a requirement of the grant when you first applied?
I guess, Senator, the answer would vary based on the program itself. Unfortunately, we haven't had one where we would drop and then the whole program has stopped, but we have had cases where we do extend the program to the local fund. And I'll give an example. One of it is the CGIS, the Criminal Justice. That started as a federal grant, and now we host it locally through the help of the other agencies.
Okay, I see. So, but nothing coming up within the next year or two? Okay, that's great to hear. What is the future plans for the northern courtroom? Have you guys extended the lease at the current facility, or are you guys planning to find another place or build your own?
Let me start, and then maybe the administrator of the courts can supplement that, Senator Ada. Senator San Agustin had asked us to submit a plan in reference to the Northern Court satellite, and so we sent him about a few weeks ago our plans in reference to building a Northern Court satellite up there. And so that is currently with the chairman, and we're hoping that in part of this effort to move away from leases and build government facilities, he had asked us, and so we pulled out our master plan that we did in 2010, in which, when there was the anticipation of the military buildup, we had hired a consultant to build a Northern Court satellite of about 56,000 square feet building that I think would have 4 courtrooms up there. And so it was all laid out, and we were going to try and build on Chamorro Land Trust property. And so it's all laid out, the plan, and it's just very coincidental, your question, that Chairman San Agustin had requested if there was any plans to put up a permanent structure. And so we submitted the whole thing in reference to what we have in our possession.
Thank you, Chief Justice, and I appreciate that. And I think it just goes to the long-term planning for the judiciary. And thank you again for that. The only other, how about the parking lot? Were you guys able to renew your lease for a long-term lease on that?
Yes, That was very important to us for the access and for our employees to, we've used that parking lot not only for employee parking lot, but when we have events at our Route 4 facility, we use that for the parking for our jurors when they come in for selection. So it has become a very important parking lot that is needed for our operations, especially during the pandemic. But yes, we have a lease right now with that operating.
Well, that's great to know, so that it doesn't compromise the parking facility. And I know you guys also have next door at the academy, the old DOA parking as well, and hopefully that, all that will be able to accommodate the patrons, employees, and those who are visiting the courtrooms. The only other question I have is, I noticed that the one building, what is the plans for that one building that's, I'm not sure if it's vacant or have you guys already started moving into it, or the old, I think Epicure building, or the
Route 4 building.
The Route 4 building, yeah, that one.
So
What's the plans with that, and what do you guys intend to do with it for future use?
So in our prioritization for our capital improvement projects that we did back in January of 2020, before the pandemic, our plan was to make that our storage facility and shut down the other lease that we have for what we call the Sinahanya. When the pandemic occurred, one of the things we were scrambling to find was a building or facilities big enough for in-person criminal jury trials, because none of our courthouses could meet that 6-foot physical distancing. So throughout the pandemic, we did renovate the building and made it what we call a high-capacity courtroom. So right now, it is serving under the pandemic as one of 2 high-capacity courtrooms where our Superior Court judges can conduct the in-person criminal trials and do jury selections. Our jury selections at the time call in 80 jurors for panels to make sure that we can properly select a jury. So we need facilities that can afford a large number with physical distancing. If and when the pandemic subsides or the physical distancing does, we will look at the facility probably for a while to just house, when we start the renovations on the Guam Historic Courthouse, we need to put probation services in our OPG division somewhere. That will be the staging ground. But that facility is operational now and is actually quite nice. And then once we get the Guam Historic Courthouse up and running and probation moved back, we will start moving our divisions over into that building. The one thing the pandemic has shown us is our facilities right now are crammed, and our employees work very close to each other in our C&M division, our probation division, and our marshals, and they are too tight. So we've been operating under very tight, so we'll use that facility way down the road. We'll start to expand and give our division some breathing room.
That's great to hear, taking care of the employees as well. Again, thank you for your budget presentation. I look forward to supporting your budget, and I hope that all the plans that you currently have in place and the plans that you are looking forward to come to fruition in serving the people of Guam and judicial system, and I look forward to it. Thank you again, Chief Justice and Presiding Judge. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. Mr. Chair, that's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Eda. Senator Brown, do you have any questions or comments for the panel, ma'am?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Certainly good afternoon to our presiding judge, our chief judge, and staff from the judiciary. One of the issues that have come up in my time back in the legislature is a bit concerning with regards to cases, and I know you don't get to decide the cases that come before you. Obviously, they have to be filed with the court. But I'm seeing a lot of enforcement action taking place with regards to like natural resource violations in our community, or even in the most recent cases with customs and enforcement action that they're doing that don't ever see the light of day. And I know that you're not directly responsible for that, but I am concerned about how do we address that, because we have a lot of time and effort being addressed on the enforcement side, the arrest and things of that nature. And yet these cases never see the light of day. And there's obviously areas, a bill right now in the legislature on a lot of these violations that the conservation officers are enforcing to actually now issue penalties versus actually, moving forward with action would lead to court, because these cases just never see the light of day. And I want to get your feedback and thoughts on that. Is the court able to absorb these cases if they're brought forth by the Attorney General's office? Because there seems to be an inequitable amount of attention paid to these cases publicly. I mean, we're hiring people to do the job. They go out and, they arrest someone, and they just go back again and re-violate because they never end up in a courtroom. Maybe for conservation, they get their equipment and guns and things taken away from them, and the cases sit. So I want to get your thoughts on that, because I am a little concerned about the fact, and I have the feeling always that if members of the public know that action will be taken, it's almost, not in all cases, but in most cases, it's a greater deterrent from them going back and committing those violations. But when almost no action's taken beyond that within our judicial system, and there's repercussions or the lack thereof, it continues, the cycle continues. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Okay, Senator Brown, thank you very much for asking that question. As you know, the court doesn't initiate cases. We just respond, and then we make sure that all parties have a fair and impartial hearing, and that all the constitutional rights conveyed to the person that has been charged with a serious crime. As far as, we used to get, as I remember, we used to get some cases where people would violate the fish preserves. They would illegal hunting or illegal fishing, but we don't really see that much. So I don't know where those cases are going. You may want to ask the Attorney General's office, because they're responsible in making sure that these cases are brought to court. I personally, since we had case assignments, my docket, I have not seen a violation of illegal fishing or hunting in my courtroom for a very long time. And I think many of the judges can probably speak to that as well. So I really can't say why these cases are not being brought to court. I don't know.
No, I appreciate it, because I'm kind of observing the same, and it's not that these arrests aren't happening. Obviously, we hear it also publicly. We hear when these arrests occur, but then again, like I said, I don't see or hear it going anywhere beyond that. And certainly I am aware you don't present your cases to yourself, that if it's a case the public needs to present, it has to come through the Attorney General's office. It's just concerning, because I'm seeing as time goes on that these particular type of cases, and I've been such an advocate for the marine preserves and helping get that legislation passed into law, that I just want to see some consistency with regards to that. And I certainly will pursue that with the Attorney General's office. But obviously, from your perspective, if those cases come before you, you can address it as you would other cases.
When they come before us, we will address the issue. But I guess the inquiry should be better addressed with the Attorney General's office.
Yes. Well, I just want to make sure it can be absorbed at your end.
These things are not being prosecuted. Huh?
Yeah.
Because I don't know the reason.
Yeah, because right now, if you're hearing any type of prosecution, it's happening at the federal court because it involves the Endangered Species Act,
right.
and not very much on the local side in terms of hearing or seeing any consequence beyond. In the case of conservation, maybe they're able to confiscate their vehicle or their equipment or their weapons or whatever. But again, that doesn't that in my sense doesn't provide an equitable sense of justice to the community.
We
for
used
these
to get
type of
civil
violations.
forfeitures of people doing illegal hunting. But I personally, in my docket anyway, haven't seen one in a couple of years. I had a trial in one of them where a person was alleged to have used his pickup truck and his guns to illegally hunt. But that was about 2 years ago. So that was, I think, before the pandemic and a few months before the pandemic. But I haven't seen personally too many cases come before me at this time.
Well, to ease the process, I mean, if we were to put in place for smaller violations these penalties so that there is a more direct consequence and actions taken, and then maybe there's something like, after your second or third violation, maybe the penalty is much more severe, and a penalty will not in and of itself suffice, and that's something that maybe we put some more serious time of looking at. Senator Atta had asked with regards to your facilities, and that Route 4 building, I'm glad to hear it's finally in use, because for quite some time it was a bit concerning, at least from the public perspective when I was out in the public, the fact that that building was acquired as a lease and yet was not used for quite some time, with the explanation that, oh, we don't have the funds to renovate it, and yet you were paying how much a month? How much do you pay a month for that facility under your lease agreement?
So that's approximately $12,000 a month, Senator.
And I believe, how long did it sit before it was occupied?
Quite a few years, Senator.
Imagine to the public how disappointing that is to hear that the judiciary acquired that building, was paying that month on a monthly basis on a building that was not used. It's that kind of stuff that publicly is, you know, you don't expect that from the judiciary. I mean, you want to ensure that the funds are being properly spent. That particular thing is a sore point. And I was reading I only knew from what the media was reporting with regards to that building, but it didn't make a lot of sense to acquire a facility that was not going to be used when there was at least did not appear publicly that there were any plans or resources put in place to use the building. I mean, that's a luxury. I don't know who gets to afford that, but most people, if it was any other government agency, we'd be sweeping the floor with them on that issue, so.
Senator Brown, in defense of my colleague, the Chief Justice that preceded me, at the time that the lease was pursued and entered into, there was funds to proceed with plans in renovating that building, but when there was an across-the-board cut and in reference to the appropriations to all government agencies and the judiciary, those funds were diverted for operations. And so Chief Justice Merriman was hampered in not moving forward with the plans that she was taking the lead in trying to renovate that building.
You know, I appreciate the explanation, but I have to tell you, and certainly I have Chief Justice Merriman was one of my very early bosses in my career in government, so I appreciate all the efforts that she would have put towards that. But publicly, again, if something could have been used to use the building in the interim, I think that would have been more acceptable than to simply have the building sitting there for that length of period of time, especially because of the relationship of one of your fellow colleagues to the owner of the building. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that raises questions in our government of ensuring that there is accountability. And there is that expectation, as you know, and as I know you're very strong in that position of wanting to ensure that there's accountability in the government to include the judiciary. So I'm pleased to hear that it's under use right now. But again, that was just for the period of time that was left there. And publicly, that explanation was not well amplified, I have to tell you. That was not the explanation I've heard given as to why that building sat for as long as it did. Even in the government, we don't have the luxury of hiring contractors sometimes. Sometimes we just have to go in and modify it to the best that we can and put it into use so that we can justify the use of the lease. So I felt a need to do that because I sat back watching publicly, wondering why that building sat for so long. The other issue with regards to your parking facilities, I know you leased it. Is there any intention at some point to acquire that property as, I mean, I'm sure it's something you need as a permanent part of your operations and the demand for parking for your patrons, for the community that comes there, for your employees? And what amount are you paying annually for the lease of your parking facilities?
Thank you, Senator Brown, for that question. If you look again on our prioritization of projects with any drawdown monies that we take from the Bank of Guam, it's our intent, to purchase that parking lot. But we have other priorities that come first. So it is listed as one of the projects that we will try to, if we have sufficient funding and we have sufficient JBF, we will try to purchase that parking lot. We did enter into active negotiations and brought the lease down to $6,000 is our rental. So we did actively pursue and got that landlord to bring it down. It is very much, as Senator Ada pointed out, something that the judiciary needs to have because of the access to justice. Not only do our employees park there, as I've mentioned before, but our jurors, when we call big bundles of jurors for jury selection. So that parking lot is very critical to our operations.
And then you mentioned earlier that you've since acquired the San Ramon building. Is that the building behind your current facilities now? And what was the purchase price? And you just elaborate further what you currently will use the building for, or what you are using it for right now?
Yes. So that building also, when we purchased it, the purchase price, I believe, was $1.6 million. It was purchased with the intent, again, on our prioritization of projects. It was a building that we're going to use to house some of our staff because we are too tight in the initial judicial building or judicial center that we're in now. We needed to expand it. That was the intent when we started in January of 2020. But when the pandemic hit, once again, we took the building and converted that to the first high-capacity courtroom so that we could make sure that we were meeting the constitutional mandate of having these criminal cases heard. One whole floor of that building is just a courtroom, and it allows seating sufficient for the expansion of the physical distancing. So right now it serves as a high-capacity courtroom, and the next floor up has the jury deliberation room, so it becomes an all-in-one, so the building operates solely as that. Once we are able, we will take that facility, as we had already laid out in our prioritization of projects, and move what are crowded divisions that are too close together and start moving them over. So we will use it as an administrative annex.
I have no problem with that. I'm very supportive. I mean, we understand the need for expansion, and that certainly even as a result of pandemic, the irony is you're probably going to have more of a workload, and yet the revenue stream, even though some of my colleagues here are quite generous in wanting to know what you need. I think we all would love to do that, but I also am a bit cautious because I don't know what's coming. I don't know what's coming in terms of our economy, especially as we may have a slow return of our tourism industry and our actual real revenue base versus the generosity of Uncle Sam that has been keeping us sustained for the past year and a half. But I've also seen the judiciary be able to react as necessary with regards to your revenue flow, and actually you were very proactive last year in outlining publicly in the event you were not able to receive revenues as appropriated, how you would prioritize your operations, which I appreciate. I think you've been very, very good in being able to outline what you need to do and how you need to adjust depending on the revenue flow that's coming in through the judiciary. I also wanted to ask, Senator Tello didn't further her question, but with regards to your insurance, health insurance, the fact that judiciary is able to do its own separate negotiations. Why is that, out of curiosity? Why are you allowed as a third branch of government to be able to negotiate your own insurance versus the legislature or the executive for the entire rest of the government of Guam also going and negotiating its own insurance plan for the upcoming year?
Senator, by statute, we are allowed to opt out, and so is the legislature. The legislature can opt out and pursue its own health insurance. We found in the past, and it started, I think, when my second term as Chief Justice, that we felt when we examined it that if we were to award it to a single provider, that we could save the government money. And so we did that. And over the years, the bottom line is we've been able to save the general fund money in reference to procuring our health insurance with awarding to a single provider as opposed to multiple providers. However, the statute has been changed, and now that is, we're going to, are still awarding it to a single provider? Multiple, yeah, we are obligated under statute this year that it can no longer be a single provider. We're still in negotiations, and I'm told that, and I'm not even privy to it, that we have to close that before we know the costs. But it could very well be that this is the last year that we will be doing this, because now we're not able to procure it to a single provider. But over the years, we've been able to show on the record the hundreds of thousands of dollars we've been able to save the general fund by pursuing it in that manner.
Well, and probably something the government should look at, because, we always are given the impression that if we have a larger pool, we're going to get a better deal. It may be good to case study the plans you have put in place over the last few years and see how effective that has been versus doing the whole government. Because at least as far as I know, the legislature is also part of the rest of the GovGuam healthcare program. Well, that just being here, but otherwise, that would be something to look at. It's very interesting. I mean, It's unfortunate. It's also the politics of insurance companies as well, and why the laws are constantly being changed with regards to that. I was pleased to hear about your efforts with technology and improving, especially I've only once in my life had the experience of being a potential juror, and then when I got all the way there, they dismissed me. But I think any efforts you can do to ease that process, because it just, the calling in and checking in and, you know, did I violate and am I in trouble with the court because I didn't answer every day or forget to do it or whatever the case may be. I mean, however, you can certainly facilitate that to make it easier and more customer friendly for your jurors to, you know, show up and determine and do their civic duty is a good thing. I mean, we're very pleased to hear with that. And then yes, I mean, because of the pandemic, we've had the bad, unfortunate things, but also the good things in terms of our capability with technology and the improvements that can be made to help facilitate the judicial process. So I'm happy to hear with your efforts with regards to that. Again, I thank you for your presentation. You're very thorough. Your staff's very confident with the information that they're presenting. So overall, it was a very good presentation. I mean, we'll work as we go along. I mean, like I said, the judiciary at least has always been very public in announcing what you're capable of doing. I also appreciate the fact that you're actually able to outline your workload and what, you know, in terms of what's been issued, the amount of cases that you're dealing with. The government of Guam, back in our time, often wrestled with the issue of performance-based budgeting so that we could actually say, if we're going to infuse X amount of dollars, this is the return back to the people of Guam. And this type of information and data is very much in line with that, so that we can get a gauge. If we're investing X amount of millions of dollars, this is what we're getting. If we reduce it, this is what we're getting. So people have an idea of exactly what it is that they're funding versus, you know, we just throw the money to one agency and we don't really know what it adds up to in terms of you know, community support in terms of what is given out and returned back for the investment that's made. So I certainly appreciate the information, and certainly also you, the presiding judge, the breakdown of your cases was very helpful for us and the public to be aware just of the volume of work that you and collectively the judiciary is having to address. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and also thank you for your presentation this afternoon.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Parrish, do you have any questions or comments for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Chief Justice, the Presiding Judge, and Christina and Diane for being here today. I know you put a lot of work into this presentation. It's very interesting. Tooth-to-tail ratio. I don't think I've heard that in a budget hearing before. Very interesting concept. So I think a lot of the questions have been covered in detail. I just have maybe a couple more regarding, I guess personnel is your biggest cost, obviously. And perhaps, I guess, what are your thoughts about utilizing the ARP funds? I mean, we still have yet to hear what the guidelines are, but you know, I think modernization can potentially assist with personnel demands. And what do you see as one of the potential ways to utilize these funds?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. As we presented, we have a priority of what we will utilize the funds for. The first is, again, our sanitization or addressing the needs created by the COVID. The second is we did have declining funds for both JBF and for client services. And for our client services, that's concerning because that is the fund that protects the constitutional rights of defendants that come before our courts. So we have to prioritize in rebuilding those funds back up to an acceptable margin that we can operate on. We can't take those funds down to the bare minimum because of what they protect. So those are the first two top priorities we'll use ARP or any type of assistance for outside of appropriations. The next is our technology support. And you know, technology is endless. There's always a new and better system available. So we'll try to be as fiscally good stewards in making sure that we invest in the proper technology that mainly addresses our court patrons that come before us. Equality, access is very important to the judiciary, that all persons that come before us can access our courts. So a lot of our technology is directed towards that. The last is the shortfalls that we've had in the past budget years to try, and that mainly is to fill the positions that have been vacated for quite some time. You know, by way of example, we have one individual who sits with 3 jobs. Our court programs administrator, we have not filled that position for quite some time. Also, we have, and we use one person to do 3 different jobs that includes that position. So that's how we would direct the funds if we were given ARP funding. But the appropriated funds of what we request is really for our daily operations and to meet the statutory mandates that are imposed upon the judiciary that we take very, very serious. And when we're trying to prioritize and balance, but Senator, we're very concerned about our employees because we feel like we've pushed them to the brink for the past 4 years, and we're starting to see retirements, we're starting to see the federal our counterparts taking our employees. So we have some concerns about that because we're very pushed on them. That's what our appropriated monies are directed towards.
So how many of your staff is due to retire in the next maybe 3 to 5 years?
Senator, in the last 10 months alone, in fact, we've had 9 retirements, and we have 2 more that have notified us of their retirement by the end of the fiscal year. We do try to communicate within our division managers. So far, that's all of the count of retirement that we have on as of today.
Okay.
But if
So-
I'm not mistaken, for the last year, we've had 21 that has either resigned or retired.
In addition to that, Senator, we have also had 23 resignations just in the last 10 months alone. And many of these, as what the administrator of the court mentioned, they do move to other local and federal agencies for better opportunities.
Okay, that's pretty significant. In the last year, you said 23 resignations?
Last 10 months, Senator.
And is that for higher pay, or what's the reason for their resignation?
Some of them, Senator, has decided to move off island. We see some federal offers. So we do provide the training and education, and then, then they move on to better opportunities.
Okay, thank you for that response. The other thing is the effectiveness of your programs for that treat recidivism, that rehabilitate clients. Do you have a number or some sort of metric that you can determine how effective your programs are as far as rehabilitating? I mean, this kind of goes into the question of caseload, right?
Yes, in order to, one of the requirements by the federal grants for our treatment courts is that we have to provide reports about the success of people that go through the treatment programs. So though the participants, can you hear me?
Yes.
The participants that go through the program, we have to report that to the federal grants. And usually, if we are successful and we meet the guidelines and the goals of the federal programs, they usually continue funding our programs. So it looks like Diane said earlier, most of our programs have either been continued or are continuing. So it shows that we are successful in at least meeting the guidelines and requirements of the program as required by the federal grantors. So it's a positive sign.
Thank you for that. So another thing I want to, maybe focus on is the fiscal responsibility. I know that's, key. So you mentioned debt service. How much is judiciary paying in debt service?
Well, let me begin by saying that the primary loan we have is the Bank of Guam loan, where this legislature has authorized the judiciary to borrow up to $15 million. We had a balance of about $5 million when we refinanced that loan, so that's an existing debt service. And as the AOC has pointed out, we have drawn down on a facility of $1.6 million to purchase the San Ramon building. We have a 2-year time period from January of 2020 to draw down the funds. But when COVID hit, we saw that our JBF revenues collections are down, and there were possibly other opportunities that we could fund some of these capital improvement projects. So we've been very conservative in reference to the need to further draw down if we can shift the revenues to other sources in reference to some of our projects. And so in answer to your question, we're paying only interest in this loan facility. It was for a 2-year drawdown period. But because when COVID hit, we approached the bank and asked if we could get an additional year in which to draw down the funds, so we're not burdened with principal and interest. And this will allow the economy to recover, JBF collections hopefully to not continue its downward trend, and just give the judiciary as well as the island economy the opportunity, because the dedicated revenue to pay the Bank of Guam loan is the Judicial Building Fund. They have sort of a restricted those funds to be utilized for the repayment of the loan, and then only for certain uses related to the continued ability of the judiciary to repay the loan. So with that, Diane can let you know how much we are paying in interest only for approximately $5 million plus 1.6, which would be about 6.6, Diane?
That's correct, Chief Justice. So because we have been deferring a lot of our drawdown, we have been averaging on a quarterly basis around $70,000 of interest payment.
All right, thank you for that. And that's all coming from the JBF? Okay. Maybe one last question. As far as your procurement, how many sole source procurements do you have? Do you have any sole source procurement?
I think in the sole source procurement, if we have any, and I really don't feel like I have the sufficient answer, but if we do have sole source, it's usually because it's tied to a system that we have, whether it's JustWare support of that or it's support of Datamax's VCCH, would be the only time that I know of that we would sole source items that we need in support of those products. But I can't answer that. We could provide that information, but I don't know off the top of my head any sole source that we have.
It'd be interesting to see, you know, the effectiveness if you're getting, if you're paying more, or if there's, you know, maybe it's by your affiliation with the federal government that, you know, the sole source is actually, you know, not that expensive. So something to think about as far as decreasing expenditures. I guess the other thing is leasing. So what types, can you do a breakdown of the leases that you have currently?
So, Senator, the request that we had submitted includes our Northern Court satellite, which is located at Dedido. It also includes our employee parking lot leased and a limited extension to our Sinahatnya storage facility until we can get back our route for its intended use.
Okay, and what's that total, the amount of leasing?
We're looking at about $295,000 under the local fund for the next fiscal year.
And that's annually?
Annually, yes.
Okay. All right. I think that might be it. Oh, insurance. So, yeah, being that, you know, the government of Guam has choice now, perhaps the window of opportunity has been missed for this go around. But is the judiciary going to look at potentially gaining or joining Gov Guam as a way to reduce expenses?
We have to make that decision by April 1st?
March 1st.
March 1st of every year, whether we're going to join Big Gov Guam or go separately. We came very close this year to joining Big Gov Guam, but when we did our analysis, we believe that for an additional year we could save the general fund. It remains to be seen. We're optimistic, but our track record is that we have, when we compare our program with Big Gov Guam, that we've been able to save the general fund hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if I had to guess, I think that we would probably join Big Gov Guam next year. But we just do an analysis, and then we do the best. We try and make the best decision, strictly based on the finances. But at this point in time, we'll know after this 1 year comparison.
Okay, thank you so much for all your responses, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Madam Speaker, you had 2 questions, and then after that, I will close the budget hearing. Madam Speaker?
Thank you. Are there, I wanted to follow up on the electronic monitoring program. I think you had said in a prior hearing that you have rules that were promulgated for that. Are those online? Or can I get a copy if they're not? And
Senator, there are online the application process for a client to take it, to be put on it, and I believe that they still are upgrading the actual SOPs. And some of those we cannot put online because they have security measures in place if we have a violation. So we don't make that information public, but we can give all the rest, provide to you what isn't already online and direct you to what is on our Judicial of Guam website.
okay, yeah, I'm curious as to the priorities. How do they determine, that this case should be, we should use EM versus another case? That type of priority making. And then I wanted to ask how long, or what is the average time period for one detainee to be using one of those? Of the 60, you said 60 clients that you've had. Yeah, for example, what is that average time period to use one of those things?
Well, the average defendant uses the electronic monitoring until he or her case ends, or either through a plea agreement, by dismissal, or by jury trial if they're found guilty or not guilty. So it depends upon each individual, but I think I like to guess maybe between 6 to 9 months.
And then when you switch from JustWare to the e-courts, I know we had talked about JustWare regarding the, showing release orders and things like that. But so is this completed? And was this at all funded by the CJAC sums or not? Or is that independent of that?
So we haven't made the transition yet.
Oh.
The end of life occurred at June. So the transition into the e-courts has not taken place yet. And it's funding right now, because of the contract that was negotiated, there's a minimal cost associated with it going into our transition into e-courts. That's paid, is any of that covered by CJAC or not? Senator, I don't have that information. I would have to provide you that. I wouldn't want to guess.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chief Justice Carbolito and Presiding Judge Lamarana, thank you and your staff for participating today. The committee will conclude the budget hearing with the Unified Judiciary of Guam. The committee will continue to receive testimony. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. and Agustin at gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 7621 South Marine Corps Drive. Sizus Masi for your attendance today, sirs and ma'ams. And for those at home, thank you for watching. This budget hearing on Bill 55-36 COR relative to the Unified Judiciary of Guam is now adjourned. It is 4:17. Please be safe and have a nice day. Thank you, sirs.